You're listening to the Joe and Rosa Show, proclaiming the gospel through word and through song.
Hi, and welcome to the Joe and Rosa Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Rosa.
And on our show today, we have Anna Aquino. How are you today, Anna?
I'm fabulous. Thank you guys so much for having me on the show.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I'm fabulous, too.
I
We're
feel
all fabulous.
I was going to say, it brightened my day right up. And so I wanted to start, and you are the author of 24 published books, from my understanding. And I know that when you were, well, why don't you tell your story, actually? I'll let you tell it. When you were writing and following God's call for your life, you experienced a long season where you received rejections from publishers and different others. Can you just walk us through that and tell us what that season was like for you?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm working on my 26th book, but I only have 3 published. But I do have an agent now, so awesome.
Oh, great.
But yeah, it was crazy nuts, crazy hard. It's a long story. God, I should have died in a car accident when I was 2.5. God called me in a ministry at 12. I just assumed that meant to go be a pastor somewhere. And I figured out, well, I'm not called to do that, and yada, yada, yada. People want usually a super spiritual answer when I tell this, but really I was watching the movie Forrest Gump when I was in high school, and it touched me very deeply. And the reason why it did is because I grew up in a house where my dad was a grunt soldier in Vietnam, and I grew up with all of my dad's stories. So as I watched Forrest Gump, something inside of me shifted, and it was like, your father has a story, and you need to be the one to tell it. And so I was like, well, in my naivety, I was still in high school, I'm just going to go tell this, and I'm going to go write it, and, you know, Hollywood producers are going to come see me, and that's the way it's going to be. And I started to try, realized I didn't have the ability to do it at that time. It just wasn't the right timing, so I got a little frustrated. I found myself years later across the country serving in a ministry. I was pregnant for my oldest daughter, and I was frustrated with God because I was like, God, I know you called me to write this book, but I just can't do it. And out of my mouth, I just kept saying, I can't. And I heard this lady preach, and it changed my life. She was talking about the power of words. And she said, many of you out there today know that you're called to do something, and because you keep saying, I can't, you're cursing your very destinies and therefore cursing yourself. So you need to repent, basically, and start saying, I can. I got down before the altar that day, and it was like, that is so me, because I was a kid that had been made fun of for not being able to write a sentence. My family still laughs at me for not being able to speak clearly because they think I speak too quickly. And I was just like, that's it, God. If you called me to do this, then I can. I was in the car that night, and the Lord just dropped how to start that first book in my head, and it was done, rough draft, in 2 months. Now, I thought, naively, it would be so easily. It would be like the Rockette saying, we've been waiting for you in the industry. As soon as I hit the end, it would be this magical experience. And I spent years, and I mean years. I went through, I think, 10 years before I ever had any professional nods. And even when that happened, the fullness of my dad's book is not published yet. I'd had a short story published about it. But it just took, I think my 9th book was the one that finally got picked up and published. I just kind of got to a point where it's like, I know that God called me to do this, and if I give up, which happens to a lot of people, if I give up, then I will forever regret it. I will forever know that I ditched on what God called me to do. I will have to face him one day, and what am I going to say? It's your fault because no doors opened? So I was like, no, patience, endurance, perseverance, we're going to push through this. And I just kept writing. And when I stopped writing one book, God gave me an idea for another one, and I just kept writing, and lo and behold, more and more doors have opened. But I just remember years of tears. I stopped really paying much attention. You listen to criticism, absolutely, but the stuff that's helpful, but what's not, you just learn to let it go. Yes, in your head you think, why am I continuing to do this? No one's paying attention. But you know what? God is, and God knows. And God is not going to frustrate you. God is going to do what he's called, open the doors, and you have to do your part and just refuse to quit.
Well, let me ask you this. As far as when you finally were published, was that obvious to you at the time that that was a God thing, that he was finally saying, it's time, I'm opening this door?
Absolutely. The first full-length published book that I ever had done was with Destiny Image Publishers. It's called Cursing the Church or Helping It, Exposing the Spirit of Balaam. And that actually came out of a season of God had called me to preach, absolutely. But at that time, I was like, I only write fiction books. I don't write nonfiction. And I struck up a friendship with one of their editors. Just her and I became really good friends, and when they turned down a fiction book of mine, she was just like, you know what, this is not personal. We love you. This is not the type of book that we publish. And that's one thing that took me a long time to realize, too. Sometimes it's about the right people, the right time, the right publishing house. And so I was sitting on that. I remember sitting on my back porch. We were living in Florida, and I was crying. I was like, God, I have been doing this too long. If there's just no fruit here, it's time to bail. And I was just like, God, what? And I thought about all these messages, sermons that God had downloaded to me, and it was like, why don't I write nonfiction? I don't know. Why don't I? And I emailed my friend back, and I said, hey, if I write this book, would you guys be interested? And she said, oh, absolutely. And within 10 days, I had that rough draft out. They wanted it. And I knew that that was God. It was a hard, different things that God had turned and stepping out on waters that I had never crossed before. But it was such a God thing, and it still just amazes me how he set that up.
Well, that's really interesting. I find it fascinating that you've written a lot of fiction, mostly because it seems that the Christian publishing community mostly only publishes nonfiction. Honestly, I'd like to see more Christian fiction books.
Yes, absolutely. Out of the 26, I'm going to say only 4 are nonfiction, 21 are fiction. I write more I write more fiction. I'm more known for nonfiction. And the traditional Christian publishing of today is very hesitant on any kind of fiction that does not fit in their mold. The book that I have out now, I put it in the ranks of science fiction. It's basically Back to the Future meets Quantum Leap. It's about a pastor that God gives him a chance to go back in time in his biblical history to kind of help him in his walk. Instead, he messes up time and has to go back and fix it so that the Bible doesn't unravel.
I love it.
And
I can
anyway,
I can see where theologically people might get a little bent out of shape about it, but I like the idea, and people need to remember it's fiction. It's not real. Nobody's actually going to do that.
Okay, so go on. Sorry.
Well, no. So anyway, that was a really hard sell to publishers because, and I even had, now I have the best agent on the planet in my opinion now, but I even had an agent who's fairly well known in the industry read it, email me weeping, saying, this has forever changed my life, but I cannot represent you because I don't know how I will ever sell it. Because the typical Christian fiction mold is basically Amish romances. And there's nothing in my head, there's nothing wrong with Amish romances, but I do really think that Christians want a little bit more.
They do.
They don't want just something that fits in a box. They don't want something that we put a pretty little bow on and walk away from. And I think that there are more and more writers kind of trying to push through that glass ceiling, myself being one of them, where it's like, I want real fiction with real people who have real issues and have a real God.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And so I would ask you, if you're speaking to somebody today who is in that season of waiting, and from what you've told us, you went through a very long season of waiting. What are the benefits? And I mean, I know that's really hard to see. I mean, I myself am in that season too. What are the benefits, and what should we be doing with this time since we find ourselves to be in a waiting period?
I'm so grateful that God did not release me 15 years ago, and I know that probably surprises people. I was one of those people that was such and I still am sometimes, but gung-ho, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, that I would have put this in front of my husband and my children. And, my first calling is to my husband and my children. And I need to put them first and learn to find a balance. And so for me, the process, it's like, not that I'm perfect in any way, shape, or form, but the Bible says that you're perfected through the process, your faith. And so I think that I had to learn, and it had to be grace, because trust me, I shed tears and I fought and I cried and I screamed, but was to embrace the process, allow God to change me and mold me, because I wasn't ready to be in some of the places I get put in today unless I went through that season.
Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that you learn, obviously, you would not have learned if
Right.
God had released you. So it sounds then like there's a maturity that happens through that. And something I'm deeply curious about, you say that it was your 9th book that hit. Has God yet revealed to you what the purpose was for the 8 books that you wrote before that one? No, seriously.
Yeah, I know that I know that I know eventually. I believe that those will sell. As you know, in this industry, once you get a big hit, then you get more and more and more. And so I still believe we'll circle back around to those. But I do think that over the years, my writing's gotten better. A friend of mine, very good friend of mine, recently requested to read that first one because she wanted to read it because she wanted to hear my dad's story, and I almost had to apologize, even though I think it's an amazing book. It's early in my writing career, and I think it could be better, and so I constantly go back through it and try to make it better. And so I think that I've become a better writer. I think that it was the process of putting words to the page. I still believe there will be a day for those, but yeah.
So you absolutely believe there was a purpose in that. It sounds like
Absolutely.
It helped you to hone your writing. And yeah, oh wow. I so thank you for joining us on the Joe and Rosa Show today. Could you tell our listeners where they can find you online and where they can find your books?
Absolutely. My books are available wherever books are sold. If you Google my name, you will find me. My name is Anna M. Aquino. That last name is spelled Aquino. If you go to my website, they're also there. That is www.annamaquino.com, which is ANNAMAQUINO.com.
Okay, well, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Joe and Rosa Show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Joe and Rosa Show. I would certainly encourage you to check out Anna Aquino's books, and you can look for her online. She's on there, and you can look for us online at joeandrosahopkins.com. You can find Rosa on lifeinsidethehouseontherock.com. She does some blogging on there. It's some really good stuff. Check it out. We talked to Anna a little bit afterward. Apparently her the first installment of that science fiction series she was talking about came out in March. It's called An Ember in Time, if you're interested. I believe it should be on sale, and I believe on Amazon. You should be able to find it on there. And we certainly hope you join us next week for the Joe and Rosa Show on the same station and same time. And I'm going to leave you with a thought today. Let's look from Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And that's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It's a very good verse, but remember, it says for him to direct your paths, you need to acknowledge him in all of your ways, and to lean not on your own understanding, but to trust him. And we do trust him. And I thank you for joining us, and God bless you all.